This was the Steven Seagal America thought it knew. A real-life seventh Dan black belt in Aikido, a man who projected an aura of invincible calm and deadly force. This is the Steven Seagal of today. Standing next to Vladimir Putin at a Kremlin inauguration, a proud citizen of the Russian Federation and a vocal supporter of its foreign policy. The journey from Hollywood's biggest action hero to a friend of the Kremlin isn't just a story of celebrity downfall. It's the story of why the U.S. government stopped trusting one of its own. So, how did it all go so wrong? How did America's action hero become a mouthpiece for its main geopolitical adversary? The answers aren't just in his pivot to the east, but in a pattern of disturbing behavior that was hiding in plain sight for decades. To get the man he is today, you have to understand the myth he built and exactly how it all fell apart. When Steven Seagal burst onto the scene in 1988, he was something new. Unlike Stallone or Schwarzenegger, Seagal's brand wasn't about bulging muscles. It was built on the claim of authentic, lethal skill. He was sold as the real deal, a martial arts master who'd trained in Japan with a mysterious past rumored to include work with intelligence agencies. This mystique was his superpower. Films like Marked for Death and Out for Justice weren't just movies. They were practically demonstrations of his supposed real-world deadliness. And the box office numbers were huge. In the early 90s, his films were box office gold, cementing his status as an A-list action icon. He was untouchable. But behind that stoic on-screen persona, a very different story was unfolding. The whispers started small, then grew into a roar. His ego was apparently off the charts. He made wild claims about his past, including that he'd done special favors for the CIA, a story no official source has ever backed up. On set, he earned a reputation for being a nightmare to work with. The most infamous example was in 1991, when he hosted Saturday Night Live. Cast members like Tim Meadows and David Spade said he was difficult, humorless, and just wouldn't play along. Norm Macdonald later called him the worst host in the show's history. He allegedly refused to do sketches and treated the cast and crew horribly, leading to an infamous, albeit unofficial, lifetime ban from ever hosting again. His behavior wasn't just difficult. Sometimes it turned physical. Just ask actor John Leguizamo, his co-star in the 1996 film Executive Decision. Leguizamo has said that Seagal, apparently believing he was a real commander, announced on set, "I'm in command. What I say is law." Leguizamo laughed, thinking it was a joke. In response, Seagal allegedly slammed him with an Aikido move, knocking the wind out of him and throwing him against a wall. It was a shocking display that showed a clear pattern. Seagal couldn't seem to separate his tough guy persona from real life. He didn't just play the part, he believed he was the part, and he demanded everyone else believe it too. But his on-set antics were just the tip of the iceberg. As his star began to fade in the mid to late 90s, a much darker cloud formed over his reputation, filled with serious legal troubles and disturbing allegations. Multiple women came forward accusing him of sexual harassment and assault. Actresses like Jenny McCarthy and Portia de Rossi described casting couch scenarios where they felt threatened and exploited. Lawsuits followed. In the early 90s, 4 female assistants on the film Out for Justice sued the studio over Seagal's alleged inappropriate behavior. While many of these cases were settled out of court or dismissed, they painted a grim picture of a powerful man allegedly using his fame to intimidate and abuse women. But the scandal that truly caught the attention of federal law enforcement was a bizarre plot that felt like it was ripped from one of his own movie scripts. In the early 2000s, Seagal got tangled up in a federal investigation involving Hollywood's notorious fixer, private investigator Anthony Pellicano. It all started in June 2002, when Los Angeles Times reporter Anita Bush was working on an unflattering story about Seagal. One morning, she found a dead fish and a rose on her car's windshield, which had a bullet hole in it. A note left behind simply said, "Stop." The FBI investigation that followed uncovered allegations that Seagal might have hired Pelicano to intimidate Bush. It was a case full of mafia-style threats and whispers of organized crime connections. Seagal fiercely denied any involvement, passed a polygraph, and was never charged with a crime. However, and this is a crucial point, he was never officially cleared either. The FBI doesn't typically issue formal statements of exoneration, which left a permanent cloud of suspicion hanging over his career. Seagal later blamed these false FBI accusations for killing his career, claiming they scared off studios. Whether he was directly responsible or not, the association was toxic. His Hollywood career, already on the way down, went into a complete nosedive. He wasn't just an actor with a bad attitude anymore. He was now a man who had been at the center of a major FBI investigation involving threats against journalists. For Hollywood, he was a liability. For federal law enforcement, he was now a known figure connected to a world of wiretaps and intimidation. His time as an American icon was over. And as the doors in Hollywood slammed shut, Seagal started looking for a new stage and a new powerful friend far from home. The pivot to Russia. With his U.S. career basically dead and buried in the world of straight-to-DVD movies, Steven Seagal made a hard pivot. He turned his gaze eastward to a country where his brand of stoic masculinity still had a ton of appeal: Russia. This wasn't just a career move. It was a total reinvention of his identity and loyalties, one that would end with him becoming a friend and mouthpiece for the Kremlin. The centerpiece of this strange new chapter was his friendship with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Their bond reportedly started over a shared love of martial arts. Putin, a judo black belt, and Seagal, the Aikido master, found common ground. Seagal started making frequent trips to Russia, showing up at martial arts events with Putin and praising him in increasingly glowing terms. In interviews, he called Putin one of the greatest world leaders, if not the greatest world leader, alive today. This was more than just flattery. It was a full-throated endorsement of a leader the West viewed with growing distrust. This friendship reached its most shocking conclusion in November 2016. In a televised ceremony, Vladimir Putin personally handed Steven Seagal a Russian passport, making him a citizen of the Russian Federation. A Kremlin spokesperson said Seagal had been asking for citizenship for a while and was known for his warm feelings toward the country. This was a huge moment. At a time of rising tension between the U.S. and Russia, a former American action hero, a man who built his career playing patriots, was now a citizen of its main adversary. But citizenship was just the beginning. In 2018, Russia's foreign ministry named Seagal a special representative for Russian-U.S. humanitarian ties. The job was unpaid and was supposedly about improving cultural relations. The irony was off the charts. A man whose reputation in the U.S. was in shambles, who had been investigated by the FBI and accused of abuse, was now supposed to be a diplomatic bridge between Moscow and Washington. To many in the U.S., it looked like a cynical PR stunt, a way for Russia to use a recognizable, if tarnished, American celebrity for its own propaganda. As the years passed, it became clear Seagal was a willing tool for the Kremlin. He loudly supported Russia's 2014 annexation of Crimea, calling it very reasonable. After the full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, his allegiance became even clearer. While most of the world condemned the aggression, Seagal just echoed Kremlin talking points. He even started working on a pro-Russian documentary about the war and made high-profile visits to Russian-occupied parts of Ukraine, including the Olenivka prison, where dozens of Ukrainian prisoners of war had been killed in a suspicious explosion. In return, the Kremlin showered him with honors. In February 2023, Putin awarded Seagal the Order of Friendship, a state decoration for contributing to international relations. He attended Putin's fifth presidential inauguration in May 2024, a visible symbol of his loyalty. More recently, a Russian state media documentary was released showing Seagal visiting occupied Ukraine and meeting with Russian soldiers. In the film, he claims to have written a letter to Putin vowing, I will be on the side of my president, and I will fight on the side of my president. He's become a fixture of the Russian state, a far cry from the American hero he once played. The U.S. government's response and conclusion. So when a former American icon, a celebrity with a history of legal troubles and a lingering link to an FBI intimidation probe, becomes a citizen and propagandist for a major U.S. adversary, the government is going to notice. This isn't about movies anymore. From a national security perspective, a public figure with Seagal's profile and loyalties becomes, at the very least, a person of interest. He went from being a Hollywood liability to a potential counterintelligence concern. The distrust wasn't just about his reputation anymore. It was solidified by direct legal action from a powerful U.S. government agency. In February 2020, the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, charged Steven Seagal with breaking federal law. The charges were for promoting a cryptocurrency called Bitcoin 2Gen. Seagal had used his social media to tell his followers not to miss out on the crypto's initial coin offering, or ICO. A press release even named him the brand ambassador. What he conveniently forgot to mention was that he was promised $250,000 in cash and another $750,000 in crypto tokens for his endorsement. Under U.S. law, anyone promoting a security has to disclose any compensation they get for it. The SEC's action was swift. Without admitting or denying the charges, Seagal settled. He agreed to pay over $314,000 in penalties and give back the money he was paid. Crucially, he also agreed to a 3-year ban on promoting any securities, digital or otherwise. This was a concrete, legal slapdown from the U.S. government. It wasn't an allegation. It was a settled charge that proved he had misled the public for financial gain and shattered what little public credibility he had left. When you put all the pieces together, the reasons for the U.S. government's distrust are crystal clear. You have a man who was a subject in an FBI investigation into mafia-style threats against a journalist. You have a man formally charged by the SEC for unlawfully shilling a sketchy crypto scheme. And you have a man who accepted citizenship from a foreign adversary, actively spreads its state propaganda, blames the West for the war in Ukraine, and has pledged his personal allegiance to Vladimir Putin. This pattern of behavior, from personal misconduct to financial deception to geopolitical realignment, paints a picture of someone who is, from an official American perspective, fundamentally untrustworthy. If you enjoy stories about where Hollywood drama and global politics collide, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Let us know in the comments who we should look into next. The story of Steven Seagal is no longer about movie fights and cheesy one-liners. It's a cautionary tale of how celebrity, ego, and a spectacular fall from grace can lead a person down a truly bizarre and troubling path. He traded his Hollywood legacy for a role in a real-life geopolitical drama, leaving him an outcast in the very country that made him a star. He didn't just lose the trust of Hollywood and the American public. Through his actions, from the back alleys of Los Angeles to the halls of the Kremlin, he gave the U.S. government every reason to stop trusting him.